Hey beautiful people, my name's Kristen. Thank you for stopping by my channel to talk about books. So I have a handful of books that I read in the month of July. I finished a couple up in the end of June into July because I was reading two very thick books. I was reading Dune, God Emperor of Dune. This is the fourth in the Dune series, and I had been warned that this is where it gets really weird, and that is no joke. It is very sci-fi, very desert planet with giant worm ecology, lots of political intrigue, philosophical, talking about the environment issues, but on an intergalactic space, different world kind of thing. Very interesting characters. And the tidbit I will share real quick about this, if you are at all interested in Dune or the Dune series, is that Frank Hebert had planned out two trilogies, and this was actually going to be the transition book. And so that became really, really interesting. And it even said in the introduction that this was his wife's favorite book because it really put a lot of the author's kind of philosophy and dialogue into it. So that made it even more enjoyable to know that backstory. I always appreciate knowing kind of the tidbits of the backstory of authors and what's going on. I also read the 6 out of 14 in The Wheel of Time. Don't want to say a lot about that because it's way into the series, but basically it was really good, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. It has not gotten into the sloggy part. It's just so much. It's like that was over 1,000 pages. So could it be a little more condensed? Absolutely, but it's a very good story. I also read House of the Cerulean Sea. I do want to apologize to those that wanted to read this with me. Just the way my life ended up, there was no way that I could effectively be part of any buddy reads or group reads at this time. So I humbly apologize for that. Although it was probably for the best, because now I kind of have probably an unpopular opinion that this book really wasn't for me, and I kind of think this author maybe is not for me. I love that this story is filled with quirky characters. I didn't necessarily get really attached to any of them, and it's the story of a unusual orphanage that is got magical children with magical headmaster, and a caseworker comes out and is trying to evaluate it. So that's the setup of it. And my big issue with this and with their books is that they are very directive in even within the dialogue. It'll say this should not happen, or this should not be judged this way, or this, and I just feel like as a reader, I don't want it to be so heavy-handed or to be told what it is I'm supposed to feel or what I'm supposed to discern. I want to believe I'm smart enough to figure that out. And so the agendas of a book that says we shouldn't judge people, that we should accept people as they are, that we should get to know people, that we should allow people to live into their identities, I totally agree with that. But that just wasn't quite the presentation or the book necessarily for me. But you can look up some other reviews to see if it's a book maybe that you are interested in. Now, I will say the remaining books are all 4 or 5 stars, and I'm super excited to share them with you. So I did read Anthony Doerr's CloudCuckoo Land. It's a fairly substantial book. And this is the same author that wrote All the Light We Cannot See, which was amazing. And I think that one won the Pulitzer Prize that year, and it was well worth it. This one, it's about 600 pages, and the first 150 pages are 4 different stories. Some of those stories even have a couple different character perspectives, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to read that through that and to keep track of which storyline are you in. They are very different. One of them is like futuristic on a spaceship. One of them is like ancient a long time ago, like in Constantinople. One is like in like 1940, 1950 in Idaho. So there's like very different situations and environments, but the tie-in is an ancient text story. So it's almost like you get to trace an old mythological story, and then who actually wrote that down at one point. How did that get developed? How did that affect or shape other things down the road? And so you kind of also get to, of course, read and learn the narrative of that myth. So you have those kind of different aspects all going on at once. And so I was struggling a little bit at the beginning, like just trying to get into it, if you will. But once you hit that kind of sweet spot, you know, once you've invested in all that and you've got it situated out and you start getting the clues of how things start going together, it is really brilliant. It is really well done. It is interesting. You get attached to 2 or 3 of the characters. It has a lot of diversity as far as the different perspectives or different worldviews that might be going on, and kind of makes you ponder and think and go, oh, this would affect different people in different ways. So overall, this is absolutely, you know, well above a 4-star for me. I didn't quite give it a 5-star just because I felt like it was a lot of work and sometimes could be a little confusing, but it was definitely worth it. So when you are in the mood for that, when you are in the mood to kind of really focus on a book and problem solve and get invested in a book, I do recommend checking that one out and seeing if that one will suit you. Then for my classic of the month, I read All Quiet on the Western Front. This is by, what's his name? Erich Marque. So he was in a war, but this is not necessarily a memoir, but we do know that his experiences influenced this. So it's a story of the Russians on the front line of World War I, and it's told completely from the perspective of these young men who are going off and going to war and what they're experiencing. And really what it is a story about confronting death and how do you have human resilience and spirit in that situation. It is told not overly graphic, but with enough detail that you really get punched in the gut, sometimes literally. But this has to be one of my very favorite classic war stories now that I have ever read. It's not terribly long, but it is very powerful, very well written, just a beautiful, beautiful story. And again, just when I am in a place of my life where I'm dealing with difficulties and adversary elements to my own life, reading about this was actually very, very cathartic and helpful and beautiful. So, you know, if you're kind of angsty or going through something, and or maybe it's October and you're wanting to wrestle with these concepts of death and destruction and that kind of thing, this actually is a really great place to start and to pick up and to read. I have the final 2 books that were both kind of, you know, 4.5, 5-star for me, are both nonfiction and just taught me a lot, as a lot of books do. Even when they're not nonfiction, I learned so much from reading. The first one is Kisses from Katie. This is by Katie Davis. When she was 19, she went on a mission trip to Uganda and felt called to make a difference in that part of the world, and even currently still lives over there, giving her life. She has since adopted 16 children of her own and just runs a complete ministry over there, serving the people, serving the children predominantly, and just making a difference. And if you saw my life update, I have been living in a house that I didn't realize was sick and had a lot of debris in my air system. And so I have been struggling with a lot of health concerns, my husband with a lot of health concerns. And now my house is not, you know, it's in process of being fixed up and renovated and under construction and all this stuff. And we have to keep turning off the HVAC system entirely, which when it's 100 degrees outside is really rough. And there were 3 days in a row that I sat on my back porch in 100+ degree heat for 7 hours each day. And part of me would wrestle like with complaining, but I'm reading this book. And I'm reading about a world where heat and dirt floors and needing to travel for water is a reality of life. And it just makes perspective beautiful, right? And just the inspiration not to complain about things, to recognize your blessings, to recognize hope in the midst of struggles. So totally the right book at the right time in my life, right? Sometimes that's how the Spirit moves. The Spirit brings to us books that are the perfect thing, that is just what we needed at that moment. That fictional character just somehow clicks into our soul. That nonfiction story just teaches us something that was so monumentally important at that time. And my top book of the month is also one of those books. And I'm just going to be a little real with y'all because it's Lori Gottlieb's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And this is a nonfiction memoir of a therapist who thinks that she's engaged to get married and then her fiance dumps her, not at the altar, but you know, shortly before they get married, and she is caught blindsided by it. And then she kind of needs therapy and is searching for a therapist that she could, you know, go to. And she goes along and she tells lots of stories about people that she's counseled and then her own counseling experience. And it is funny. I laughed out loud. And y'all, I just have to say, I have not cried so often, so hard with a book in, I would say, at least 5 years. This book just had me crying because she would touch on a story of somebody that she was working with that their struggles were either so poignantly meaningful or so tragically like heart-wrenching that I would just start crying. Either way, either it was really great or it was really, you know, sad and touching. And I just got to where I literally, this is the perfect cover. This is the perfect cover because I would need a box of Kleenex when I'd pick up this book, because this book was just, particularly with the struggles of all the mental angst and the stress and the short tempers around my house as we don't feel good, as we don't even know what's going on, and then to get devastating news about your house being really, really, you know, sick and having so much to do. And then there's not even one phone call they have to make. There's multiple. And yes, books are magic. Enter the book is so appropriate. When books can be that escape where we just go off and we actually receive the therapy of life that we need from a book. I hope, my friends, that this day you have that book in your life, or that you are led to that book in your life, that you find that magical place that you can enter where the character, where the story, where the place is just what you need to feel heard, to sense that you're not alone, to understand that somebody else's story is in fact part of your story, that we are connected, and that in so many real ways the stories and the books and the literature is what does that. So go forward. Happy reading. I thank you so much for hanging out with me. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. You have a blessed day. Happy reading. See y'all again soon.